St. Mary's in the afternoon on Saturday. And maybe about, if I'm lucky, 100 on Sunday. And then up here, maybe I might get 40 or 50. Very, very few left on the hill, you know.
Oh boy.
And a lot of the old people too, if they have like a son or daughter married living out in the flat, they'll come up and pick up grandma and bring her to church, you know, to their parish. But it's I find it very satisfying. You know.
So the ones who do come here are the ones who are around in this neighborhood,
right? Yeah,
and have been here for some time, probably.
Right.
So
yeah.
A different,
for years now, up on the hill here, it's usually been the two extremes. Say, old people, or a young couple has just gotten married, and they can't afford to buy a new house on the flat. They might move into an old house, you know. So the last of a family dies, and then a young couple moves in for a few years. So, like in my first communion classes, I might have, 20 children making their first communion. But then once the children, you get up into the upper grades for my religion classes, they're very few. Chiefly the younger people for a while, a few of them, and then they move off the hill.
Well, if I could, I'd live on the hill, I think.
Yeah, if it hadn't been for the mines, that'd be the logical place to build. And in the early days, they all built up here, of course, because those men came up out of some of those mines, like a mine, say like the Emma, was like you were in a tropical jungle. It was wet and hot, and then you come up pouring sweat from that with copper water all over your clothes, and then to walk into 30 or 40 below, you didn't want to have to go very far to get home.
Right.
Kevin told us that when he was a kid, he remembers you could always tell, he said, at night when the shifts changed, because the coughing of the miners would wake you up at night going by the house.
Yeah, it was silicosis. So many of them died very, very young.
Well, one of the things we've done is to check out the graveyards where we've gone, and it's remarkable here how many graveyards of 20, 30, 40-year-old men you see.
Right, so. And many, of course, there were many of the Irish that died, it seems, of lung diseases, even among those who didn't get silicosis, even the young priests that came out. A great number of them died of. I often wondered if it wasn't, if you have people living for a couple of thousand years anyway in this very moist climate, suddenly you move them to the opposite type of climate, high and dry. How they would adjust to that. One of my brother's poems, in fact, that he tried to write a good poem on it for years, was on the priest plot out at the cemetery here. There's a mausoleum of our merchant prince, Dan Hennessy, a granite mausoleum that sits there, and there are all these little stones of the priest plot, and the image in my brother's mind of this big dog with all these bones in front of it was just stayed in his mind. And also one of the things that made it, for him, kind of food for poetry was the juxtaposition of some of these priests. Like there'd be this man, who was a great staunch propounder of Leo XIII and the rights of labor and so on, a man who wouldn't spit on anything the Anaconda Company could give him. And then here's another fellow who would toady to the company and so on, as we had one Monsignor here, and for all his sort of fawning over company officials, the most he ever got was some bronze doors for St. Patrick's Church, and I thought, every time I look at those bronze doors, I say, was it really worth it?
What's
to have kind of been a copper collar, as we'd call them in Butte in the old days. And then, other these men that were just, people like Father Rooney and others. That man I mentioned, although Hannon isn't buried out there. And then some of them, just very, very opposite types. One very, very scholarly man. And right next to him is a dull plowboy, really. And one fellow that was kind of a poetic character, and he's right side by side with a fellow that, as my brother says, ran his parish with a railroad watch.
Is this the cemetery down here on Montana?
Right. Yes, St. Patrick's. It's the old cemetery there. And it's an interesting old cemetery. My friend, who's in the hospital now, Father O'Donnell, until he got so sick, he had to give up his apartment they'll only keep it for you so long. He's in the same government housing for the elderly that I mentioned. This Ellen Sullivan is in. Well, they had to take the apartment. So he used to walk, as you'd say, I'd walk to the boneyard when the weather was nice. He'd walk over and go in the Masonic cemetery, go down through the Jewish cemetery into the Catholic cemetery, and then he'd come back and he'd say the rosary, and he'd finish up in the Jewish cemetery. There's a lady there who it so happens she was a great friend from our childhood. Her brother had a kind of an old, it was a cafe that was at its peak, say around 1900. It just kept going downhill, so by the time we were in high school, it was nothing but, sodas and Coca-Colas and so on, and the old glass that looked like marble top tables and so on. Well, her headstone was just the right size, and Father Joy would sit there and finish up his rosary, and he has a beard. And of course doesn't wear rarely wears a Roman collar. And I said, somebody's going to come off the interstate someday, and they'll see that great big wrought iron sign, B'nai Israel, the Jewish cemetery. They'll see the little rabbi, and then they'll see him saying the rosary. Do a double check.
There's an ecumenism.
Right.
Yeah, we walked out through those cemeteries, and it's really impressive how different they are just looking around them. The St. Patrick's Cemetery seems to be more characterized by gray colored stone and upright markers, and the cemeteries next door are pretty much other color of stone and lower stone.
Yeah, and there's one piece of granite carving in St. Patrick's that is genuine sculpture. It's clumsy, but it's genuine. It's an angel toward the back. And there's a Carrara marble piece up front that's not. It's done, with a pointing machine. But I've often wondered if the O'Farrell that Carrara monument is due is the same family as O'Farrell Street in San Francisco, because this fellow was married to a sister of one of the Copper Kings, Marcus Daly. And I kind of suspect he was. The inscriptions are interesting, especially not in the oldest cemetery in St. Pat's, but in the other one in Holy Cross. Things like there's one that has the second Valentino, one young Italian fellow that died, when he was like 20 years old, and it has whatever his name is, James, let's say Bertoglio or something, and it has the second Valentino. And then another fellow that has a minor. He heard his last whistle on the hill.
Wow, that's over at the one.
Over in the one by the airport. Yeah. There's some. That's where my dad's buried, and my grandmother was buried out in St. Patrick's down here. But
those there are two by the airport, aren't there?
Right. Yes. And there's one that's sort of non-denominational, and the other's the newer of the two Catholic cemeteries, Holy Cross. That's very, very big. It certainly has a bigger population than the city of Butte. But, more of our people are out there than up here. That's where I've lost most of my parishioners to. Really, not to Palm Beach or Palm Springs, or that you've probably heard that old story, that chestnut about the fellow that was very ashamed of his dad's Yiddish accent and was always correcting his father. His father said one time, well, we're going to Palm Springs, in the sense of, Dad, it's not Palm Springs. He said, that's right, it's Palm Beach.
Wow. People don't move away from Butte. They just move off the hill.
Yeah,
right.
This is one of the most intense places we've been in our trip to Montana. People. It's a kind of a double image. They characterize the town as being slowly eaten up by the mine. Even though our photographer, Mike, got down inside the pit the other day and said that they told him that they were building a dike against the city side of the mine, and that they're not going to come any farther. Kevin told me that's just propaganda. They had to shore it up. They had to shore it up or it'll cave in on it. And he said, "I'll just figure out another way to get past it." Yeah. But at any rate, the one image of the town is that it's slowly disappearing.
Up. Yeah.
And the other image is that it's the finest place and the place where everyone wants to stay forever. And,
it is interesting. I know a friend of mine who's Jim Aylward. He was a priest for our diocese. He's laicized now, and which I think is sort of a knight on the white horse thing. He's a very devout man, but he's a Jungian. Well, he's really a diplomat of the Jung Institute. There aren't all that many.
No, there aren't.
When he was made a diplomat, there were something like, I think, 24 or so diplomats in the world, sort of walking branches of the institute. But he had a very strong idea. You know, he said the M ambiguous, that's for mother. You know, and the depressing effect of the town. You know, so many of the factors, you know, say the defeatist mentality, you know, the one company town.
Yeah.
You can't fight the company, you know, that sort of thing. And the frustrations of that, and if you wanted to make something of yourself, you know, you had to move out to the coast, to this, that. All that whole psychological matrix, he took quite a pessimistic view of. I don't feel that. I see his point, but I don't think it's all that bad.
No, besides, you can't tell the Irish you can't fight the company, can you?
Yeah.
I mean, they've been doing it for some years.
Right, yeah, a number of them certainly made it.
Before people came to Butte.
Right,
the idea of
sure.
fighting City Hall between Ireland and England is...
Right, exactly, sure, it's a tradition. Yeah, you know, Barry, this friend of mine, Father Moriarty, he was just moved, about a month ago, but the parish he was in San Jose was just a classic microcosm of the church. He has Chicanos, a lot of native Mexicans, from a part of Mexico where they're very, very devout, rural area. And the Chicanos are pretty well, they're only sort of nominally or on the superstitious level Catholic, you know, and not much instruction. And a small number, about 70 or 80 families of Palestinian Catholics. You see, you know, when you do filling out marriage forms, you know, for one of these Arab families getting married there, and say, you know, where were you born? Bethlehem. Do a little double take.
Really?
But and then his parish has been the biggest single sponsoring agency for bringing in Chilean refugees. So they're of course to a man and a woman, all Marxists. Yeah. And he's a lovely guy. He's been involved with himself and another fellow went down. There's some exploiter who has been kind of, he's like a mercenary in bringing refugees into the country and kind of using them as indentured servants and so on.
Oh, really?
And he Kuhn's one of these Chileans that he already had gotten in, they practically kidnapped some people away from him. You know, just to, because he's, this fellow what they did was illegal, but what he was doing was immoral.
Yeah.
At any rate, he's quite a guy, and he's the Irish Fighting the Companies have brought this to my mind. He was saying that if he's gone for a day or something, he'll ask, you know, what took place, and he was asking some of the youngsters about their dance. They have, I did at least 4 or 5 dances a week in this hall. And you know, for the Chicanos, and this one young kid was saying, well, there were so many of us there, and there were so many Anglos. This was his first year there, you know. And he said, look, don't you ever put me in the category of Anglos. He said, you've been fighting him since 1840s, and we've been fighting him for 800 years. So from then on, I was asking one of his assistants there, Father Isaacs, and when I saw the name on the door, I said, Jewish? And Koo said, right. He said his father's Jewish, his mother's Irish Catholic. And they're 2 brothers in the San Francisco diocese, the Isaac brothers. But I asked Father Isaacs, I said, what about Koo and the Anglos? He said, if you ask any of these kids, who was at your dance last night, they'll say there were so many of us and so many paddies. So, you know, you could be Italian, you could be whatever, and if you're non-Chicano, you're a paddy. You know, that's all right. That's cool.
Wow. That's a little more distinctive than Anglo.
Yeah. But his family is from that same intense, very patriotic, intensely patriotic, I don't mean intense in a neurotic way, as my own. And a sample of this, he said when he was starting in the minor seminary, the Sulpician Fathers, a French society of diocesan priests who do nothing but educate priests. They're very, very limited in what they, deliberately so, they want to specialize in that work of being religious order, but not technically so, of educators. And one of their traditions is that during the summer, if you're in your last 4 years before ordination, you write a summer sermon and preach it to the whole community during the year. Or if you're in your college years, you have to do a thesis and read that in the dining room, from the pulpit in the dining room. You know, they space it out through the different meals of the year. And if you're in the high school level, you have to write an essay. And he did an essay, he's starting in the seminary down there, on the 3 great Irish poets executed in the Rising of 1916. And he did them in the order of importance. He started with Joseph Mary Plunkett, and he said, now we come to a still greater poet. And he had a couple of paragraphs. He's reading on Tomás MacDonagh. And then the third one is Padraig Pearse. Well, he's a household god, of course, in, say, when I was growing up. And same way in this Father Coo Moriarty's family. He said, now we come to Padraig Pearse, the greatest human being who ever lived, with the possible exception of Jesus Christ. And the old French priest in back of the hall, you know, of course he was stunned, he thumped his fist down, he said, Mr. Moriarty, sit down. You know, he said, I didn't realize I'd uttered a blasphemy. You know, that was what he was used to when he was growing up, you know. And the greatest human being with a possible exception of Jesus Christ. I like that tentative note to it. You know, memories in dredging up thoughts of childhood and so on. I've always pictured. Do you have children?
Yes, we have 5.
They'll probably,
We have 5.
Well, they'll picture you the way I picture my dad now. He tells stories of the childhood, yeah. And whatever story he was telling us, I always pictured like a little 3-year-old with a big black mustache, or a 9-year-old with a big black. I couldn't picture my father in any other way. I'll show you. Mick will have to see this. Miko brought it, isn't it? I'll show you his picture. You know, on this island, for example, it's a bit dusty. Let's see, with that mustache. Yes, He really didn't have it when he was 3, but he'd mentioned, for example, when his mother would. There was one place on the north side of the island that there was a spring, and it was natural spring water. You know, otherwise they'd have had to bring it from the mainland. And also there was another place that had spring water that they used for the cattle, but this had a place that was nice and cool for putting butter and things. It was their refrigerator. But it was a very precipitous climb. And one day when his mother was bringing some butter down there, she got far enough away from the cottage that she didn't want to go all the way back, and she saw that the little toddler had come after her. It was my dad. And they wore, you know, skirts until they were maybe 3 years old at least. But she just took a big rock and anchored him, put it on his skirts, you know, and kept him there. So he couldn't fall down the cliff, couldn't follow her. But he had a marvelous memory for things, and that's why he so enjoyed watching little children. And one of the stories, for example, he mentioned was, you know, the shrewdness of his mother. I didn't know, for example, you could aim a goat, not having been raised around animals or anything. But he said one of the girls on the island was putting wash out on the hawthorn bushes to dry, and she had this basket of clothes, clean clothes, and he said he was a little boy at the time, and he aimed the goat at his cousin, who was bent over, you know, to pick up the laundry to put it out on the bushes, and just at the right moment he had the perfect aim, and the goat apparently did as he was aimed, and the goat butted her, and the clean clothes went all over the place. And then he turned while he was laughing and enjoying his trick, and he saw his mother standing in the doorway of their cottage. And, you know, fear overcame, and then he saw she laughed, and he was relieved. And he was quite happy that she saw how clever he was, and he laughed and came over to her, and sort of sharing the fun. And as soon as he was within arm's reach, he grabbed him and belted him. But he always remembered how clever his mother was. She didn't want to have to chase him, you know. So she lured him with a laugh. She pretended she enjoyed the prank, you know.
Are we all so clever?
Yeah. I can't catch some of mine even with a smile.
Yeah. Yeah.
I saw a young boy pull a chair from under his mother at the reception we went to today, and she just went whackle on the
no.
Oh, gee.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
So sad.
Yeah. Gee. Yeah. Yeah.
She was breathless for a while.
Oh, yeah.
Terribly embarrassed.
Yeah, sure. Well, we had in that sense had a strict upbringing. You know, I think in other things, in a lot of things, my parents were rather libertarian, but on that behavior bit, you know, it was a common statement that my mother said, you know, if you don't behave, you know, the next time I take you out, I'll leave you home, you know, which is an Irish bull. You know, the next time I take you out, I'll leave you home. Like saying, they tell the story, you know, someone going down to the seaside. How do you feel, Mike? Fine. I went down to the such and such a place on the coast. He said, I feel like a new man. I'm my old self again. You know, all these constant contradictions.
Did your father sing a lot at home, or just
He did.
occasionally?
Yeah, he did. And his father sang. And his grandfather, this Ernick Deelish was his nickname, which literally means beloved Irishman. It's the fellow that I mentioned to you. They wrote the long poem on. My dad's father was Donal O'Sullivan, named after this fellow, and his grandfather, my great grandfather, was Michael. Shanavy Hall, or Old Michael, they called him. And also they called him Ernick Deelish, the beloved Irishman, because he fished so much during the famine and kept so many people alive. And he's the one that, I have one verse on my father's headstone, my father and mother's headstone, that is taken from that poem, that not a Turk nor of Luther was Michael, nor a man to be scoffed at by priest or by brother, but a true branch of Donal O'Sullivan Og, was that man, whose right arm laid gaps in the Sassanic forces. But he hummed a lot. Now, why, I don't know, but my dad would imitate the way his grandfather would hum. And but my dad's father, he said he had a beautiful voice, and my dad learned an awful lot of his songs from his father, and some from his mother. And some of those he learned from his mother. He didn't like to sing too much, not that he didn't love them, but he kind of choke up.
Yeah.
He associated certain songs so much with his mother that just to sing them. And then other songs, there's some that he hummed. That there was one, for example, I don't know, and I don't know if my dad knew the words. I don't think he knew the words to it, because that's why he hummed a song that would be played on the violin that his mother liked. The name of it would be literally Young Red-Haired Sally.
What was it in Irish? Do you remember?
Mahal, they aspirate the S there for Sal. Og Rua. I could hum a little.
Yeah,
we'd love to hear it.
But this, you know, make like a violin with my mouth. It went like this. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. That doesn't quite sound like a Stradivarius, but it's the best I can do.
That's beautiful too.
So, but there were some that had lovely melodies to them.
I think some of the most haunting melodies I've heard are from Ireland. I don't know what accounts for that. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't either, Barry. There are some that there's a certain type that there must be some technical explanation for these various tonalities. But there's some things that particularly grab me, and as they say, on the gut level. So.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that a lot of the music must have backgrounds in ancient times. I mean, certain kinds of tones and scales become sort of normal, quote unquote, for the ear of the people who pass them on. But I think beyond that, there must be a certain selection. Maybe that's occasioned by the way of life or attitudes or something like that.
Yeah, I suspect something too that there would be an emotional resonance of a certain pathos. You know.
Yeah.
Like one thing I've certainly noticed is, and there might be something about this to music too, but I find, for example, in some of the stories, like some of Elie Wiesel's stories of the Hasidic Jews, and some of the jokes, I find the Jewish humor rings a bell more with me than almost any other kind of humor. Well, wit, let me put it that way. Sure. Douglas Hyde makes a good distinction, I think. He says I think it's in the preface to his book on Irish literature, where he says that the average English countryman has more humor than the average Irishman, his Irish counterpart. He said, but he doesn't have nearly as much wit. And I think there is something to that. I myself, I love the English sense of humor, but there's a Yiddish term for it. There's a certain turn to the Irish wit that the only parallel I noticed, and I think probably from being subject people, persecuted, that there's a certain similarity of a lot of double entendre in not just in the moral sense, but you get your message across to the person you're making fun of, to your friend, and I notice an awful lot of that in both types of humor. In some of the stories that I know, 2 different stories that my dad had, in some of the epigrams, one of the phrases that my father used to use was scale and she the ancient than couple agus and couple na chala, which was, if you're talking to someone and he's paying no attention to you, you say, it's like telling a story to a horse. And then added is on couple na chala, and the horse asleep. It's the double thing there, and that I think is kind of typical of of Jewish humor too. That you see that same trait of they hit you with the point and then they add to it.
On a totally different direction here, we attended an Orthodox. A Serbian Orthodox wedding today, and we also attended church last Sunday, so we could ask people if it were possible to do something like this.
Yeah.
And what we noticed is the singing that's used in the church service is very distinctively, the style and the tone and the harmonies and so on are very distinctively Yugoslavian. That is to say, even though it's a liturgy, the liturgy is colored very heavily by the music of the home country.
Yeah.
Just in the same way we were talking about with wit and humor being sort of almost recognizable. And I was just wondering if does this come into masses at all?
It doesn't. Now, thank God it does.
I was wondering too.
But that's the pathos of it for preserving Irish culture. In Wales, the psaltery and a number of other things they're incorporated into the Methodist ritual.
Yes.
And so that being a good Methodist helped preserve your Welsh culture. But unfortunately that didn't happen in Ireland. In fact, the whole weight of the hierarchy was for Anglicization.
Yeah, that's
in the last century.
Yeah.
So that there's nothing
in the music
that is distinct, like that even the slightest things, medieval terminology, for example, of some of the Irish feasts, their terms for a particular feast, the whole religious tradition of medieval Ireland is totally obliterated. My dad, for example, the name that we would have in our calendar now, the modern calendar, which gets back to a very early calendar of the church, calls New Year's Day the Feast of the Solemnity of Mary. It was before that in the calendar that dates from 1494, it was the Feast of the Circumcision. In the Gaelic medieval tradition, they call it the Lá na Killa. It was the day of the church. It was a feast of the church.
Sure.
It was the first day of the year. And there are a lot of names for things everything religious about the Irish tradition was kind of washed down the drain as the language was lost.
Yeah.
And that's where the Serbs had a great advantage, and I think their home liturgy was a big advantage.
Oh, sure.
You go into a Serbian house in Butte, and they'll have, let's say in the dining room, a drawer with the candles in it and other things. And even though their equivalent of a diocesan newspaper is, I don't know if it still is, but I know it was when I last saw a copy of it, in Serbian, you think, well, how are they holding on to the young people?
Yeah.
One of the reasons, I think, is that they're very strongly patriarchal.
Sure. Yeah.
In Butte, for example, if a girl marries, let's say, a Protestant boy or a Catholic boy, she may very well, it's very unlikely she'll be Protestant, but if she marries a Catholic boy, she might become a Catholic. But it is almost never the case that the boy will. In a mixed marriage, they're so strongly patriarchal that it's the only particular group I know of that way where almost inevitably the Serbian man on a religious level will predominate. What his religion is what, even if he doesn't go to church, that's going to be the religion of the children. Sure. And that's one of the things. I only heard once, Barry, their religious music, but what I heard of it wasn't, as far as I could tell, from the folk tradition.
Yeah.
It's like some things. Now, I've attended masses of the Ukrainians, and Peter the Great brought in all these Italian musicians, and so some of that gorgeous. There's some beautiful folk songs incorporated, but a lot of that beautiful polyphony is very Italianated.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of thing I heard with the Ukrainians, but there was maybe one song, and I'm not sure, that I said that the one time I preached on there at one of our church unity things, it wasn't a regular Sunday service. There was one song that I thought maybe that is of the folk tradition.
Cremated Sam McGee, I shot Dan McGrew, I hung Kevin Barry, I smashed some bugger's pipe,
Did you ever sing Marrowbones? About the woman who tried to poison her husband with marrow?
Yeah, that's the old lady from Wexford. Now that was a kind of a common song.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Again, one of those that you didn't specialize in?
I didn't. It just... That was kind of a calm. That was the old lady from Wexford. She pushed him into the sea.
Yeah.
Fed him poison.
Have you been here before?
There.
There's a nice book you might enjoy. It's an Irish book, but it's called Come Day, Go Day, God Send Sunday. It's the singing of John Maguire. Now I might be wrong, but I thought he was a Fermanagh. Is that the county? There's a county in Ireland.
Furman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was put out with the, in Ireland, but it's this one man's script.
Mm-hmm.
And he's an Irish singer that was just marvelous,
Yeah.
Most of his songs are just local things that had to do with the local happenings in the area. It's sort of like your song.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been so long since, try to explain something to you. A lot of times I'm asked to do, to MC something or give a talk, and I'll say, if you'll take it at the spur of the moment, I don't rehearse nothing. And I do a little humor stuff, but I do it just as it comes into my head.
Yeah.
And I can't sit down and plan it. I have to. And that's what's got me going here is so many things that just pop up.
Yeah. Well, at some point, if in the next week, if we could find a little block of time and we could listen to that tape and then ask about some of those pieces.
Mm-hmm.
But I really feel bad about, like you say, your business.
Yeah, that's tough to give you time. You're just gonna have to take that on the spur of the moment. Eh?
Well, we can sure do that.
Yeah.
I can sure do that.
Yeah.
We'll be here in town. I do want to try and contact the lady that you mentioned.
Ray Mulcahy?
Yeah,
Yeah, she plays the concertina real well. I don't know how long it's been since she played it. I think they were looking for a chromatic.
Is there anybody in town who might have one? If she doesn't,
I don't know.
the closest one that I know of for sure.
See, it's been 20 years since I got away from the joints.
What's a concertina?
It's like an accordion, but it's hexagon.
Most of the Irish
Yeah.
accordion players didn't play what we call stomach Steinways.
Yeah.
They played these little hexagon ones. They play the airs and reels and all on those jigs.
Everyone doesn't have to have everything, because you just about get it, or you get the car paid for, you get this or that, and then you got to start coming up. So you
look for other things,
Well, you do, and yeah, and you find, I think that, people, their whole sense of values is.
I'm trying to think of some
swimming pool or money.
folklore.
They really have a very set of values, and
Did you
they're,
hear that Sam
they
again?
know they can survive.
Oh, they got all of that's service and stuff. See, that's all recorded. They're looking for something out of that.
So it'll be tough to go.
But I guess the Irish songs, that were from, or particularly Irish, that especially Waylon Hand wouldn't have been interested in.
In Bambridge town in the county of Down one morning last July, down the bowling green came a sweet Colleen, and she smiled as she passed me by. She looked so neat from her 2 bare feet to the crown of her nut brown hair. Such a coaxing elf I had to shake myself to make sure I was really there. From Bantry Bay down to Derry Quay, and from Galway to Dublin town, all made I've seen like the brown Colleen that I met in the county down. As I onward sped, sure I scratched my head, and I looked with the feeling rare. And I said, says I, to the passer-by, who's the maid with the nut brown hair? Oh, he smiled at me, and he said, says he, she's the gem of Ireland's crown. Young Rosie McCann from the banks of the Bann, she's the star of the county down. At the harvest fair now I'll surely be there, all dressed in my Sunday clothes, with my shoes shine bright and my hat cocked right, for a smile from the nut brown rose. No horse I'll yoke or no pipe I'll smoke till the rust on me plough turns brown. Tell me on fair bride by me on fireside is the star of the county down. Well, that's your down. That's again the people in the north. There is a county down. And that is part of Ulster.
I guess I've heard that song. No, I didn't hear it. It was actually in that Come Day Go Day
Is it?
book, I think.
Sure, if I had the wings of a swallow, I would travel far over the sea. And a rocky old road I would follow to a place that is heaven to me. When the sun's gone to rest way down in the west, I would build such a nest in the place I love best, in that dear little town in the old county down. Now it lingers way down in my heart. It was never so grand, but it is my fairyland, just a wonderful world set apart. Oh, my island of dreams, you are with me, it seems, and I care not for fame or renown, but like the black sheep of old, I'll return to the fold, little town in the old county down. Now again, that would be sang. Now you'd go down to Boyle's St. James Hotel and sing those two songs, and you were as welcome as the flowers in May. See, that was where all the Donegal and Down people stayed. You go to Buckley's boarding house, sing the Corkonian songs, at Buckley's bar, and it, you know, you kind of had it. And then when you wanted to get them ticked off, you know what to sing or something. But
What about other Irish jokes? Do you think any of those
well,
pass around or still do?
there was an Irishman had to take his wife to the doctor where she was rather elderly, and the two of them. She was having some problems, and he had her examined, and while she was getting dressed, he come out to the old man, and he said to the old man, the doctor did, he said, Pat, he says, has Kate ever been through the menopause? He says, good God, I don't think she's ever been through Yellowstone Park. Then the cousin Jack, cousin Ginny had to take the cousin Jack, her husband, to the doctor to be examined. And while he was getting dressed, the doctor come out and said to him, Martha, your husband doesn't look very good to me. She says, damn, he never did to me, but he's good to the kids.
What about the one that he was in the bar and he comes home and she said that she'd scare him, she'd say it was the devil?
Yeah. He'd been doing a lot of drinking, and she thought she had to stop him, and somebody said, well, you ought to scare the hell out of him. So he'd come home this night about 1 o'clock in the morning. She heard him coming, and she jumped out of bed and took the sheet off the bed with her. She got down to the foot of the stairs and threw the sheet over her. He fumbled with the door and walked in, and she's standing there with the sheet over, and she figured she better say something, and she says, I'm the devil. He says, the hell you are. He says, glad to meet you. He says, I've been living with your sister for 20 years.
About the guy that fell in the vat. About the guy that fell in the vat of whiskey.
Oh, yeah. They used to make Bach beer here at the Ville-Marie. And it was always extra help put on. So there was two Irish friends, and they decided to go down and wrestle the job at the brewery and get that good job for a short time. Get out of the mines for a little bit. So they got the job at the brewery, and they're filling up the Bach vats, and they got them started it to brew in a few days. This day, one of them fell from the scaffolding into the vat of beer, and he got drowned. So they sent his partner up to tell the widow. And he goes up to the widow, and he says, Mrs. Lavelle, I'm here to tell you that Pat fell from the scaffolding into the vat of Bach beer today, and he's drowned. And she says, that or a God, and the poor man probably never had a chance. He said, but he did. He come out twice and went to the toilet.
Well, you reminded me when you said falling down. In Irish friend of mine was telling about a wake that they went to. It was on the second floor of some building. His grandfather fell down a flight of stairs. He had so much to drink at this wake. He was going around the next day saying, "Oh, if you didn't have fun at that funeral, it was your own fault."
Yeah. We had some wakes here that were so good they had to postpone the funeral.
Really?
Yeah. There was a wake up in Centerville one time, and fella got it. Two fellas were going to the wake, and they got to the Eagle Saloon, and they got in there and got drunk. So a few days after or a few hours after they got drinking, they went to the wake. They got up to the place where the wake was, and it was a duplex. But the wreath was hung on the gate. So they went into the place next door from the wake. And everybody that was at the wake, the house was vacant. They looked around for something that resembled a coffin. So they knelt down by the upright piano. They said their Hail Marys, and on the way out, one said to the other one, he says, "Good God, he didn't look too good." He says, "No, but did you see the set of teeth on him?" But, you know, they do yet have the wakes.
Do they still? Yeah.
Yeah. Very much so. Great respect.
Sure.
And their families, oh God, they'll bring food and great story. I'm not going to mention any names here, but there was a prominent dentist's mother died. She was rather elderly, and of course they expected quite a while. And one of the prominent physicians went to the house. They're both raised in the town now. And he had a cake. And he offered his condolences, and he says, "We're very sorry." And he said, yeah, I understand. He said, "Well, my wife baked this cake for you, for some food." And he says, "Oh, wait a minute. I had you down for a ham." Fact. Yeah. But you'd have to know the two individuals to really appreciate it. I was with him the other day. Now there's a case where I went out to visit this fella the other day, and we're just kicking around all the time. He'd tell about a guy he was raised with had a hair lip. And he's ornery enough about it, you know. And he went to this dance this night up the Winter Garden, and he asked this girl to dance, and she turned him down. And she says, "Ah, kiss my ass." So the girl went and told her brother. Her brother was a big guy. And he come over to this fella with the hair lip. He says, "You told my sister to kiss your ass." And he says, "You better go back and apologize to her, or I'll beat the hell out of you." So he gets back to the girl, and he says, "I come over to apologize to you and tell you you don't have to kiss my ass. Your brother and I made different arrangements." I never heard of it before either. You know, where we were raised right where the top of Wyoming Street. And
That's a
on the,
the mining is now.
yeah, it's all tore out of there now. Wyoming Street sits right over here. This is, well, there used to be a water tank set right in behind this garage here.
Yeah.
And that's where the overall gang, you know, what they call the overall gang. They all wore bib overalls, and they stayed there. Just below the tracks here, there's a set of tracks around this way. This is the O'Sullivan's home here.
Mm-hmm.
That's their garage, but below there's a set of tracks right in here. And right over that hill, you're in the city, and the city police. So the gang hung out here. Just
Naturally.
well, see, the sheriff was elected, but not the police. So they had the little political force of the sheriff, you know. But never bothered us, but Jesus, they robbed all over the town.
Oh, really?
It never bothered us. I know them all.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
They're all great characters. Just
That's really. What was your favorite song? Was it the Grandma?
Oh, yeah.
Or was there another one that you really?
I like Tread on the Tail of the Cart. I love them all, and he sings them as such random that you cannot never quite. And swinging Katie on the what is it? Say hello to your Uncle Mike. That one.
oh, that's dear old Denny Gall.
I love them all, and I never know the names of them all. But he'll come out and sing them all.
Now, dear old Denny Gall is a pretty popular song.
Could you sing it?
3 years ago, this very day, I left the Cove of Cork, and on a ship from all Erin's Isle, I landed in New York. There wasn't a friend to greet me there, a stranger on the shore, but I wore an honest Irish heart, and fortune came galore. So here I am back again on dear old Erin's Isle. My friends, they greet me at the pier and greet me with a smile. There's faces there that I surely forgot, for I was so long away. But my mother, she'll introduce us all, and this to me she'll say. Shake hands with your Uncle Mike, me boy. Hello to your sister Kate. And this is the girl you used to swing down on the garden gate. Shake hands with all the neighbors and kiss the callings all. You're as welcome as the flowering May to dear old Denny Gall. They gave a party when I come back, and they came from near and far. The road was lined for near a mile with Irish chanting gar. The whiskey flowed like buttermilk to fill me heart with joy, and the piper played an Irish reel to greet his Yankee boy. So tomorrow off to church I'll go, to a wedded I will be, to a pretty little calling, sweet Biddy McGee. Now Biddy was true and faithful to her Barney o'er the sea, and will join the harp and shamrock with the stars of liberty. There came Brannigan, Flanagan, Milligan, Gilligan, Duffy, Malarkey, Malone, Lafferty, Rafferty, Donnelly, Connolly, Dooley, O'Hooley, McGinnis, Malone. Colonna, O'Honahan, Lanahan, Flanahan, Fagan, O'Hagan, O'Houlihan, Flynn, Shanahan, Manahan, Fogarty, Hogarty, Kelly, O'Kelly, McGinnis, McGinn. And I'll shake the hand of my Uncle Mike and the hand of my sister Kate. I'll hug and I'll squeeze as much as I please the girl in the garden gate. And I'll invite all of the neighbors to the wedding great and small. And I'll live content and pay no rent in dear old Denny Gall. With Brannigan, Flanagan, Milligan, Gilligan, Duffy, Malarkey, Malone, Lafferty, Rafferty, Donnelly, Connolly, Dooley, O'Hooley, McGinnis, Malone, Colonna, O'Honahan, Lanahan, Flanahan, Fagan, O'Hagan, O'Houlihan, Flynn, Shanahan, Manahan, Fogarty, Hogarty, Kelly, O'Kelly, McGinnis, McGinn. Just to show you that there was no repetition.
Wow. Did you ever learn all those?
No, some of them I know, and some of them, if I hear them, then I can pick them up again. I don't have near the memory he's got, unfortunately. But you know, have you ever read the poem, of course you must have, about Sam McGee?
Right.
By heart.
Really? Can you do it?
Oh, all of them, yeah. The best one they wrote was The Hermit of Sharktooth Shoal. That was written by a guy that, it's The Hermit of Sharktooth Shoal begging Robert W. Service's pardon. It was a parody to that. A guy, I think Gallagher wrote it.
Sure.
The North Country's a hard country, the mother's a bloody brood. Its icy arms hold hidden charms for the greedy, the sinful, and lewd. Where strong men rust for the gold and the lust that would sear a Northland soul, but the most wicked is born from the pole to the horn, was the hermit of Sharktooth Shoal. He was just a boy in the parson's joy when he fell for the gold in the muck, and he learned to pray with the hogs in the hay on a farm near Keokuk. But a service tale of elect kale and whiskey and woman wild brought his morals clean from soup tureen from this pure but honest child. That's wrong. The North Country's a hard country that mothers a bloody brood. Its icy arms hold hidden charms for the greedy, the sinful, and lewd. Where strong men rust for the gold and the lust that would sear the Northland soul, but the most wickedest born, from the pole to the horn, was the hermit of Shark-Tooth Shoal. Jacob Kane was the hermit's name in the days of his pious youth. He cast a smirch on the Baptist church by betraying a girl named Ruth. But now men quake at Yukon Jake, the hermit of Shark-Tooth Shoal, for that is the name that Jacob Kane is known from Nome to the pole. He was just a boy in the parson's joy when he filled for the gold in the muck, and he learned to pray with the hogs in the hay on a farm near Keokuk. But his service tale of elect kale and whiskey and woman wild drawed his morals clean from his soup tureen from this pure but honest child. He longed for the bite of a Yukon night and the northern lights' red flicker, or to play some stud in the frozen mud and drink the raw red liquor. He wanted to mush along in the slush with a team of husky hounds and fire his gat at a beaver hat and knock it out of bounds. So he left his home for the hill town Nome on Alaska's ice-rimmed shores, and he learned to curse and to drink and worse till the rum dripped from his pores. And the boys on the spree were drinking her free in this Malamute saloon, and Dan McGrew and his motley crew shot craps with a piebald coon. And the kid on the stool banged away like a fool at a ragtime melody, and the barkeep vowed to that hard-boiled crowd, "I'll cremate that Sam McGee." Then Jacob Kane, who had taken the name of Yukon Jake the Killer, would rake the dive with his 45 till the atmosphere grew chiller. Then on a sharp command he'd bid 'em to stand and deliver their hard-earned dust, and then drink the bar dry of its rum and rye like a Klondike bully must. And without coming to blows, he would tweak the nose of dangerous Dan McGrew, and growing bolder, he tossed over his shoulder the lady that's known as Lou. Oh, tough as a steak was this Yukon Jake. He was hard-boiled as a picnic egg. He scrubbed his shirt in the Klondike dirt and drank his rum by the keg. But because of their wives, or in fear of their lives, he was shunned by the best of his pals, an outcast he from the camaraderie of all but wild animals. So he bought him a hole in a Shark-Tooth Shoal on a reef in the Bering Sea. And he lived by himself on the sea-lying shelf in lonely iniquity. And miles away in Keokuk, Iowa, this rune maiden did fight to remove that smirch of the Baptist church, just to bring this heathen light. Now the elders declared that all would be spared if she would bring her holy word, from the Keokuk home to the Helltown Nome, just to save the sinful bird. So 2 weeks later she took a freighter for the gold-cursed land near the pole. But heaven isn't made for a lass that's betrayed. She was wrecked on the Shark-Tooth Shoal. All hands were tossed into the sea and lost, all but the maiden Ruth, who swam to the edge of the sea lion's ledge, where abode the love of her youth. And he was hunting a seal for his evening meal. He handled a mean harpoon, when there at his feet is not something to eat, but a girl in a frozen swoon, which he drugged to his lair by her dripping hair and rubbed her knees with gin, and to his surprise she opened her eyes and revealed his original sin. Now his 8-month beard grew stiff and weird, it felt like a chestnut burr, but he swore by his gizzard and the Arctic blizzard that he would do right by her. The hot sweat froze on the end of her nose till it gleamed like a tilts of pearl, and her bright hair fell like a flame from hell down the back of this grateful girl. But a hopeless rake was Yukon Jake, the hermit of Shark-Tooth Shoal. He re-betrayed that dizzy maid and wrecked her immortal soul. Then he rowed her ashore with a broken oar and sold her to Dan McGrew for a husky dog and some hot eggnog, as rascals are won't do. Oh, ruthless Ruth, this maid uncouth, with flaming cheeks and lips, she sings rough songs for her drunken thongs that come from the sealing ships. For a rude stain kiss, this infamous miss would trade a seal's sleek fur, or perhaps a sable, if they are able. It's much the same to her.
What a memory.
Yeah, that. There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails have secret tales that make your blood run cold. The northern lights have seen strange sights, but the strangest they ever did see was the night on the marge of Lake LaBarge that cremated Sam McGee. Now, Sam McGee was from Tennessee, where the cotton blooms and blows. Why he left his home in the south to roam around the pole, God only knows. He was always cold, but the land of gold seemed to hold him like a spell. And he'd often say in his ugly way, I'd sooner live in hell. One Christmas day we were mushing our way over the Dawson Trail Talkie or called through the Parker's fold, it stabbed like a driven nail. If our eyes we closed, our lashes froze till sometimes we couldn't see. It wasn't much fun, but the only one to whimper was Sam McGee. That very night we laid packed tight in our robes beneath the snow. The stars were fed and the stars overhead were dancing a heel and a toe. He turned to me and caps his heel. Cash in this trip, I guess. And if I do, I'm asking that you won't refuse this last request. Well, he looked so low I couldn't say no, and he said with a sort of a moan, "It's the cursed cold, and it's got right hold till I'm chilled clean through to the bone. Yet it ain't being dead is my awful dread, it's the icy grave that pains. And I want you to swear that fallen or fair, you'll cremate these last remains. Now a friend's last need is a thing to heed. I swore I would not fail. We started on at the streak of dawn, but God, he looked ghastly pale. He crouched in the sleigh, and he raved all day of his home in Tennessee. And before nightfall, a corpse was all 'twas left to Sam McGee. There wasn't a breath in that land of death, and I hurried, horrid driven. But this corpse half hid that I couldn't get rid because of this promise given. It was lashed to the sleigh, and it seemed to say, you may tax your brawn and brain, but your promise true, so it's up to you. Cremate these last remains. Now a promise made is a debt unpaid, and the trail has its own stern code. Through the days to come my lips were dumb, and my heart how I cursed that load. In the long, long night by the lone firelight, the huskies around in a ring hauled out their woes to that homeless snows. Oh God, how I loathed that thing. And every day that quiet clay seemed heavier and heavier grow. The on I went, and the dogs were spent, and the grub was getting low. The trail was bad, and I felt half mad, but I swore I would not give in, and I'd often sing to the hateful thing, and it would hearken with a grin. So I came to this margin, Lake Labarge, a derelict there lay. It was jammed in the ice, and I saw in a trice it was called the Alice May. I looked at it, and thought a bit, and looked at my frozen chum. Then here, said I, with a startled cry, is my crematorium. I tore some planks off the cabin floor, and I lit the boiler fire. I found some coal a-lying around, and I heaped the fuel much higher. The furnace roared, and the fire soared, such a blaze you seldom see, and I bored a hole in the glowing coal, and I stuffed in Sam McGee. Well, then I took a hike, 'cause I didn't like to hear him sizzle so. The heavens scowled, the huskies howled, and the wind began to blow. And though it was cold, the hot sweat rolled down my cheeks, and I don't know why. And the greasy smoke in an inky cloak went streaking down the sky. I do not know how long in the snow I wrestled with the grisly fear. The stars come out, they danced about, but ere again I ventured near. I was sick with dread, and I bravely said, I'll just take a peek inside. I guess he's cooked, so it's time I looked, and the door I opened wide. And there sat Sam, looking cool and clam, in the heart of that furnace roar. He wore a smile, sure you could see it a mile. And he said, please close that door. It's fine in here, but I gravely fear you'll leave in the cold and the storm. Since I left Plum Tree down in Tennessee, it's the first time I've been warm. That's a good one.
Boy, that's a great one. How did you come to learn those? Just liked them?
Like, but see, that jargon is similar to the jargon here.
Uh-huh.
You know, that lilt and everything and that's just about the jargon. You know.
Wait a minute, let's
Really? Levi Parker, go back to your car. Your folks are ready to go home. Levi Parker. Uncle can do the honors for the hip man, so I'll turn the mic over to my Uncle Alfred Gifford. Oh, thank you. Thank you. You're doing a great job up there. Thank you. First, I want to say thank you to the follow committee, Mr. Harlan, all the members of the follow committee. I want to take this opportunity to say thank you on behalf of my grandson here. Giving him the honor of coming home here today to be the whipman in this arena here. It's a great honor. I have all respect for this arena here, our traditional way. For honoring him this way, I want to say thank you. We took the Donnie Agiba, I hope. Dagger, either Ishba, Wahanish, Dagger, Dagger, Mali, Mahati, Adeko, Gabi, Agishta, Bagake, Dagan, or Nidesh Kaman. I want to thank you that way too. That's the committee members, Pizza High Hope. Hope, Coconut, Pizza High Hope. Thank you for the job that you're doing out there. You've been doing a great job out there. I think it's been several years that we've had that we are fortunate enough to have a great turnout like this, to have so many people come home, and to put my grandson here, from doing this here, to take this great honor today, the last 4 days here, to have him come home and bestow these honors upon him. On the east side of the gateway, Ishagama Atani said, Ikagana, Sage, Ikagana. How about the shade I believe? Brahma, Wazai got to Umari, Nada Abadiga. Shade I believe, get down to Udega, Ega, go with Ishka, and bring down the coconut. I want to say thank you on behalf of the all committee here. And in behalf of my grandson here, that he was able to come home and to take up such responsibility and also the honor that was bestowed upon him. It's a great welcome home thing to him. Like many of you that have been assigned, designated the tail dancers, I want to thank those gentlemen for doing the honors here throughout this flower. We've done those time here, your power. They came to entertain you. They came to retain their heritage, their cultural ways. You saw the little one, the little buffalo there, the buffalo dancer, and the group. This is what you are doing here today. You gave my grandson here the great honor to be the whipman here. We bow. I want to thank each and every dancer that came into this arena here today and for the past 4 days to share and to participate in this Montreal Tribe 153rd annual call. We know that's officially on record, but then the Omaha were doing this prior to that time. My nephew, Dennis Hastings, is doing the research. Maybe we'll find other things in the archives that will prove when the Omaha actually, maybe it was in their beginning. So it's good many years, long beyond that 153rd, we know that. But we're having a great time here, and I want to thank everyone. My nephew, my grandson, and his special. Everyone that came out, you had something in your hand for him. I want to say thank you to each of you. God bless you for your kind gesture here. We those of you that don't understand my native language, I'm saying thank you. I humble myself to say thank you on behalf of my grandson here. You have helped him. And we appreciate it. And Dave's grandson, I want to thank you myself personally. I'm glad to see you home to do the things that they ask you here. That's our traditional ways here. You've done a great job. Appreciate it. You carry the flag in this arena here. Nationally, that's a sacred thing. Omaha, in this arena here, is very sacred. I know that man that prayed here, prayed for all of those that were returning home from whatever direction, the forward direction, coming home, to be amongst us again, to be with us again. These are the things what power really means. Today, we're thankful that my grandson, Dave, said, Dave, I'm going to tell you something personally. Your father, in my walk of life, one day, when I could not be well, I was sick. Through a prayer meeting, your father sat the chair of the fireplace. He sat on his knees all through the night. In the morning, when he brought water in for us at midnight, he prayed for me. He prayed that maybe someday, among the Omaha people, that I could be living and take my place in this society here. That's what your father did for me. I always remember that. With this, I gave her, yes, because I'm not. We talk about this, Jawas, Yashinga, Ushima Giretti, the Totana Sasha, Yashinga, this time, it's a great pleasure to be recognized this way by my friend, Mr. Bill, who has been a friend of mine since back in the early 1960s. During the early 60s, the Omaha Tribal Council worked day and night getting the Omaha Tribal Rules updated, bringing proof of all of your ancestors Tribal Council, finding a friend among all people. A friend that they became to be a very, very special person among the Omaha people. The Omaha Tribal Council, through the Bureau of Indian Affairs, employed Mr. Bill here to update the Omaha Tribal Road. Back there, in the early 60s, you all remember that there was a claim settlement. I think it was $2.9 million that was to be. Everyone having a share in it. And the road was being brought up to date. Mr. Brill did this. I know that he worked day and night, working through the federal government and the congressional records, wherever we could find through the archives the Omaha people's history. Now, Mr. Bill done an awful lot of work. We know that. And he worked real hard at it. We found through his research who we all are individually. You people became acquainted with him. Some of you took him by the hand and said that you adopted him as a relative, whatever kinship that you took with Mr. Bill. Now with the Omaha Tribal Council, during that time, Mr. Bill came on the reservation, worked in the central offices in Washington, D.C., to determine who we all are individually. He checked out through the archives to find our family tree as to who all the Macaulays, the Wolf, Butlers, Coyotes, Smiths, all of these names he took by each individual family. And today he comes back to us again, very happy, he says. Now I know him. I know him to be a gentleman of gentlemen. One of a kind. I felt what he said. I acknowledge this feeling that he has. He said he was happy, but he said, I expressed this through tears of happiness to be back among my Omaha people. And today, he has these family trees of different ones that he has taken the time individually, solely on his own time, that today that he could do this for a certain number of the Omaha people, that he will make a presentation to you of this family history of your individual families and relatives and appreciated. Like today, you Omaha people had something that was very historical. I was very proud. And yet, with the songs that you heard this afternoon, that you dancers danced through, it brought a lump in my throat to hear those Omaha people singing the songs that came from your host drum here throughout this hour. Those songs that you heard are what we are still carrying. And how many years is that? We only have records to show that this is your 153rd annual get-together of this type. This type of a thing was not what we called power in the old days. It was a festivity of Thanksgiving. During the time the crops were matured, the time that our huntsmen came back with all the food that was to be prepared for the fall and the winters that was coming. That's what the festivities were all about. And today, the Omaha people made history again, and again. And we have Mr. Bill back here to witness this thing. Maybe someday, maybe 100 years from now, you will find all of your names more secure with history written down as it should be. We want to say thank you, Mr. Bill, for what you have done. I know that the people that will be getting these family histories here will take this, and they will be able to give this and pass it on to the relatives to be carried on so that we all know what clan we belong to. Not that we don't know, but that we will know it exactly where it derives from. So, Mr. Bill, I want to say thank you on behalf of the Omaha Press and the Powwow Committee here, who has worked so hard to bring about this festivity for the 153rd annual get-together here.